In this video, we're going to look at unit testing with the Mocha and Chai frameworks. And I'm going to start with the web chat program that we used in a previous lab. So let me start by cloning the repository. And I'm going to pop open a git bash window. And I'm going to cd to c users mark downloads. And let's make a new subdirectory called testing. And then cd into there. And then I'm going to clone the repository into this folder. So that will be git clone https://github.com pcc cis 195n /webchat.git. And then I'm going to cd into the web chat folder, and I want to install all of the node packages. So that would be npm install. So it went ahead and it added all of the node modules that were required for this program, and I should be able to run it by typing node server.js, and then let me open a new browser window, and I should be able to access it at localhost 3000. Good, so it's still working. Type my nickname in, and then should be able to chat as normal. So that's looking good. I'm going to go ahead and stop the server for now. And open the project in WebStorm. So I'm going to close the logging project I've been using for this week. And then open. And I put that in downloads, testing, web chat. So click on that and OK. Good. So now we're ready to go. The program runs, and we want to add some unit tests to it. And I'm going to start with the database class. So I want to unit test this class, and what I'm going to do is write separate tests for each of these methods in the database class. And right now there's not very many of them, so I won't end up with that many tests, but it will be enough to illustrate the frameworks. So I'm going to start by adding a couple of packages that I don't have yet. So the first thing I need is to install Mocha. And I also want to install Chai. And Chai is an assertion framework that lets you write tests. And then Mocha is a test runner that will run through all of the tests that you write. So the install looks like it worked okay. I have a warning about an audit, a security vulnerability. And so if I type npm audit, that will show me what the vulnerability is about. So it's in a package that MS SQL uses called Axios. And I can fix that by typing npm audit fix. And I've just fixed the security vulnerability. So let me go ahead and npm, actually let me do git status. So that just modified my packages because it updated the version of Axios I was using. So let me go ahead and git commit, actually git add dot git commit dash m fixing security vulnerability. Okay, and then git push. Whoops, I misspelled push. Git push. And now you shouldn't have to worry about that security vulnerability when you clone the code. So now that I have Mocha and Chai installed, I've installed them into the project. So the Mocha executable is actually in /node modules. Actually, just try node modules. I want a command shell. So let me go ahead and open a new command shell. And I'm going to cd into testing web chat, downloads, testing web chat, and we'll dir. So I want dot backslash node modules bin dot bin and then Mocha. So I should be able to say that and then give it the name of a file, but there are no test files found right now. So let me go ahead and make a test file. And I'm going to right click on my web chat folder and make a new JavaScript file. And since this is going to be a set of unit tests for the database class, I'm going to call it test database. And I'm not going to add it to Git. I'm just going to keep all these changes local. And so let me just start writing. The first thing I want to do is import the Assert framework. So const assert equals require chai dot assert. And then I can just go ahead and use describe a set of unit tests for the database class. And then a function that actually holds my unit tests. And I'll just go ahead and use arrow notation here. And then inside, I actually go ahead and add my unit tests. So the first test I want is for the constructor. And I actually want to make sure that the constructor gets run before all of the other tests, and that basically I store the object that I make when I construct it into an object that's going to be shared across my tests. So basically I'm going to have a local variable called db, which is going to be empty to start with. And then I'm going to write a before function, which Mocha is going to run before it runs any of the unit tests. And so this is going to be a function as well. And what I want to do is set db equal to new database. And then I'm going to go ahead and write a unit test for the rest of the constructor. So this is going to be checking constructor. And that's going to be a function. And I know the constructor worked if db.pool is not null. So I want to, let's go ahead and assert not null. I'm sorry, is not null. db and then also assert is not null db.pool. And I'm getting that right out of this code here. So it sets SQL to something that was required. I could check that as well. And then it sets pool to a connection it makes. And so this is actually a promise. But I'm just checking to see if it's not null right now. And let's go ahead and assert is not null db.sql. And if all of those pass, then I know that my constructor worked, at least as far as these tests go. So let's go ahead and run our tests again. This time I'm going to specify the name of my test file, test database. Okay, and set of unit tests before all hook for check constructor. I got an error, database is not defined. So that's what a fail looks like. In order to make it pass, I'm going to import my database class /database.js. Let me try it again. Great. So my constructor worked and it passed. So now that that works, let's go ahead and add the next unit test. And so the constructor is done with. This promise version fetch history is going to return a promise. So let's unit test that, even though it's not actually being called by anything. So we're going to test fetch history under promise. And that's going to be a function. And here we're going to go ahead and we want to call something that returns a promise. And we want to wait until the promise is resolved before we execute the rest of the unit test. So what we're going to do is make this async. And then we're going to use await. So history is going to be equal to db.fetch history under promise. And we're going to await that. And that should return an array of 500 posts. So let's go ahead and assert that. Let's assert array. No, let's assert equal history.length to the number 500. And we can add the message in case of failure. Length should be 500 posts. And let's go ahead and test that bit. So that passed. It took 498 or 489 milliseconds. And then let's also assert that the type of this thing is an array. So is array history. And actually, we probably want to do that before we check the length. So history should be an array. And there are a zillion of these different assert functions in the Chai package. So it's a primary reason we're using it instead of the built-in assert. What else do we want to check? Well, let's go ahead and check for each of these things that it has the right column. So let's go ahead and console.log the first one just to see what we're dealing with. Okay, so should look like that. Should be an object that looks like that. And so we want to check to make sure that it has all of those keys. So let's assert dot has all keys. Actually, what we want to do is do that for each object. So that's going to be history.forEach. Post into that. We're going to assert all keys, or has all keys, post, and then it takes an array of keys. So that's going to be ID and name, type, and time, and post. And then we're not actually going to check the contents, the values here at all, because they could be a lot of different things, or possibly empty depending on the type of the post. And then we don't need that console.log anymore. So let's see if we pass this one. Post should have specific keys. And let's go ahead and run it now. Okay, so we passed fetch history promise. And then fetch history should be basically exactly the same because this is just an async function, so it's going to return a promise as well. It's just written using async await, so it's a little simpler in terms of the syntax. But we're going to just duplicate that code and use it to test fetch history. And everything else should be exactly the same. So let's go ahead and check that. Okay, so that passed. Now you'll notice it's taking a while before it actually exits. And that's because we left our connection to the database up. And this won't actually exit until the testing framework times out. So maybe the next thing we want to test is that close thing at the bottom. So actually it took a while there. So let's go ahead and test close, and these do happen in order. So here's the close method, and it should close the pool. And let's go ahead and set the pool to null as well. Just so that we have something that's easy to check. Pool.close, and then this.pool equals null. Okay, so let's go ahead and try unit testing that. And here we're going to call db.close. And we're going to assert null is null. db.pool. Pool should be null after closing. So let's go ahead and unit test it now. Okay, so we actually failed on that test. Pool should be null after closing. Expected blah to equal null. Yeah, so we're getting this problem because this part here isn't happening until the promise resolves. So we really need to wait until this thing finishes before we execute this. So in order to make that wait, we have to make this async, and then we'll await this dot pool dot close. So let's try it now. Pool should be null after closing. Let me go ahead and await here as well. So I need to async that and await. And now it should work. So let's go ahead and try it. So I need to do this. Let's try that. Okay, so that worked. So we're waiting here before executing that, and then this is asynchronous, so we also have to wait here for the close to go through before we check to see that pool is null. And you'll notice it returned right away that time after it finished running the unit tests. Yep. So that's good. All right. So now we have the next method. The last one is this add message. And so we want to add an object to the database, add a post to the database. And then we want to make sure that it's there by fetching it back out of the database. And then we want to remove it when we're done. So this is a little complicated, but not too bad. So, and I'm putting this before the close method. So this is going to be testing add message. and there. So first thing we want to do is add the message. So let's go ahead and make a message. And I'm going to use all dummy values in this post so that it's easy to find and delete. And I think, do I still have, yeah, a list of fields is here. So ID I don't specify. Probably doesn't matter if I specify it or not because it doesn't get written to the database. Only name, type, time, and post get inserted. ID gets automatically generated because it's an auto number column. So name is test name and type is test type and time, and I want to I want this time to be the highest possible time, and I happen to know that time is a 13-digit number. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So that should be the highest time. And then the post a test message. And then I'm going to call db.addMessage that message. And then I can try to fetch that message back out of the database. So to do that, I want to let connection equal db.await db.pool. And I have to await because that's asynchronous. So I have to make that async so I can wait. So now I have a connection, and then I want to do connection dot, basically this select statement here, except I only want to select one. So con.query is select top one star from posts order by time descending. And then that's going to be asynchronous, so we're going to await that and let post equal that. And then we want to assert that post. This is actually going to return a record set with an array. So let's just console log it, see where we are so far. I think it's going to return a record set with an array of one result. So yeah, so here's what we got. We got an object with a record set property, which is an array with one result, and that's the value that we want. So it wrote it to the database, and we're getting it back out, which is good. So I'm going to go ahead and put this whole thing in parentheses, and that should be the object coming back. And then the record set property, and then the first item in the record set should be our post. So let's try it again. Good. So there's our post. And now this is a brand new object because we just read it out of the database. But we want to compare it to this thing on all the columns except for ID. So what we're going to do to make sure that the rest of it matches is let's let message.id equal post.id. And then we're going to assert deep equal post message Now I'm using deep equal here because post is an object and message is an object, and they're different objects. And even though they have the same properties and values, equal will return false as far as them matching. So equal pretty much has to be the same object. Deep equal will actually compare the properties of both objects to see if they match or not. So deep equal will pass here. They should match deep equal, but it would fail if we used equal. And I'm going to demonstrate that by making a copy of this line. And this one's just going to use regular equal. And now let's try it. And it should pass one of those asserts and fail the other. Yeah, so the one that failed, expected versus actual. Message read from database should equal, and it doesn't. Same values, though. And I can tell they're the same values because if I come in at this line where I'm updating the ID property of this message, now watch what happens when I do that comparison. So it actually shows me the object and flags in red the part that didn't match. So the actual had an ID of that value. There was nothing in the expected that wasn't in the actual. If there had been, it would have shown it in green. So it's actually giving me a difference between the two. So white matches in both. Red is in actual, but not in expected. Okay, so now we know that this is actually doing the right thing, and we know that we have to use deep equal. And if we run it, so we passed that test. The last thing we have to do is get rid of that object that we just added. So we already have a connection to the database. So let's go ahead and let result equal. And then here we're going to con.query delete from posts where time equal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So that should only delete this post. We probably have 2 or 3 of them because we ran this method 3 or 4 times. I forget how many, without cleaning up after ourselves. So let's see what we get in this result object. Console.log result. And I have to await that. So here's what we got back, and we can check on this rows affected. Oh, we actually had 6 of them. Okay, so we added more than I thought. The correct number should be 1 after the code is working properly. So let's go ahead and assert equal result dot rows affected with square bracket 1 square bracket. And I think I probably need deep equal for that as well. So it won't work the first time anyhow, because it's going to return 7. Oh, no, actually it did. Okay. So I got 1 not equal to 1 because I'm using equal. So let's go deep equal here as well. Okay, that all seems to work correctly. And then the other thing you can do is you can actually run your Mocha tests right out of WebStorm. So you see when I have test database loaded, I have these little run buttons next to my describe method. I get 2 runs for that, and then 1 play button for each of the test suites. And I can click on one of these runs to actually run a set of unit tests for the database class, or to debug, I can run this under the debugger so I can put breakpoints and so on. And also run with coverage, which means it will include information about methods that I'm not unit testing. But I'm just going to go ahead and run a set of unit tests for the database class. And says I passed 5 out of 5 tests. Here was the command line it actually executed. Node, Mocha, UI, BDD, lots of stuff. Okay, complicated. But it gave me a nice friendly set of comments about each of the unit tests that it ran and whether they passed or not.